Yeah, after we had worked out this arrangement and the first day happened, I think we felt we had set realistic expectations and we were going to get there. And this one was close. I mean, today was the day we had set as kind of our expectation, and along the way we met time and again our expectations or exceeded them.
I have to agree. I think Oregonians have something to be proud of. We've all three spoken often of the historic value to this session. Everything from the co-governance model in the House to a third-term governor, to actually the cooperation and work done by the Senate under those circumstances. I think we're leaving today, and Oregonians will look back as they review what's been done in the Oregon legislature and say, this was a good one. This is good for Oregon. It's good for the legislature's reputation to say you can put people in difficult positions, they can work together and still get good work done. I'm very pleased.
Expectations. When I went through the organization situation with a Chambers Tide, and so I was very focused on the House and what it was going to do. And I got really worried when they decided to go with the co-speakers, because we had moved away from that in 2003. But then I watched it. It's interesting. I found myself wondering, because they moved so quickly to make it happen. I thought the way it started, they would take them quite a lot longer, and all of a sudden they did it. And then I remember the early meetings with Speaker Hanna and Speaker Roblan, and I was so taken by this thing. They sort of, they're very faithful to their parties and their different personalities, and they have totally different backgrounds. But there was this, I don't want to call it band of brothers or chemistry going on, that I said, and you can say these things when you're 68. I started to think that we might just move mountains, really. But then I'd say, don't do it, Peter. Don't get your hopes up, because redistricting is something I really wanted to do. I wanted us to balance the budget on time. We were totally on our own. We were totally on our own, and so the campaign season had been particularly brutal. But I started to really develop expectations after I watched the two of them and the way they related to each other. And so I said, I just think it, and it got better and better every day. And even though they probably have different feelings about me, I do think that my state and their people were extraordinarily fortunate these two were chosen. I'm not sure anybody else could have done what they've done. I just don't know. So much of this is the personalities. I mean, it's relationship. And they truly, we're here today because of these two gentlemen. They're the ones that deserve the high praise. They do. And I know that's going to sound like, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. I've been around a long time. And they both had incredible responsibilities given them under incredible difficult circumstances. And they were getting hit from all sides, even by their own team. And somehow they were able to maintain their devotion to one another, respect for one another. And they just somehow they could handle all that stuff and just make it happen. So it really, I am so taken by the fact the House chose these two men, and that these two individuals day in and day out stepped up, even when they must have been, Lord knows what their personal lives were about. Lord knows what they must have thought sometimes when Speaker Hanna was driving back to Roseburg, or Speaker Roblan was headed back to the coast. Lord knows what they must have had. They must have had their doubts, and maybe they didn't, but I just think they must have. So my expectations started to grow once I saw what the House did, and more importantly, once I started to work with the two of these gentlemen.
Mr. President, we have 2012 coming up, the first regular. I know there have been 2 practice sessions, but this one's for real now in 2012. How do you expect that will unfold, given that how you've worked with the House in this session?
Well, this is where I started to get in trouble, because I developed this litany of prizes, victories, failures, as well as what worries you the most. I think we're in the best position we can have going into February, given, and we talked about this occasion. I think the Speaker Hanna, Speaker Roblan one day said, we need to do this because we got to get ready, because it's also going to play into February. They had that kind of vision. It wasn't just now. They were keenly aware that they're still got to move into February, and that is going to be much more difficult, in my humble opinion, than this. The one thing that worries me about February, and it has nothing to do with these two individuals, we've overpromised. And that's got me worried, and I'm guilty of that. And so I'm really worried about 35 days and all the things I said, well, we'll work it out in February. Now, maybe the two speakers didn't do that, but so I'm worried about that. But I don't think we could be in a better position in February given the relationship with Arnie and Bruce, and they better not have any change of plans. And if they do, they better talk to me before they do it, because I'm going to make sure they decide otherwise, and I will take steps to make sure they don't. So I feel okay about February, but I will admit, and I should just say it in front of you two, I shouldn't surprise you, I can be direct, that I am worried about the fact that there's been some overpromise in the expectations, and members won't realize they need to take 24 days off, 24 hours, and then start thinking about the interim and getting really busy if they plan to be successful in February. And that's my view of what's coming in February.
I have a follow-up to that.
Well, wait, these gentlemen should be allowed to talk too. I'm not just about Peter.
Yeah, I'll just say that I have the same concern. We have a lot of task force. We put through a lot of legislation that requires work to be done between now and February, whether it's the transformation in our health care or whether it's education bills. There is a lot of work to do, and I think that the members in both the House and Senate are up to that, but it is a different way of being. I think we've practiced pretty well the last couple sessions, but it's really, this time is going to be really, really important. And the task forces, I have a lot of people who were asking me today, let's get going, so I'm pleased with that, and I anticipate we can, but it is frightening to think of all the things that we need to do to finish out this, and part of that plays into it is how the economy goes over the next few months.
Well, what I would just simply add is that we have a lot to reach for. We actually raised the bar, I believe, in terms of legislative performance, given that this is historic, that it is, as you say, Peter, the first constitutionally mandated annual session. The good news is we have the infrastructure in place with our committees. As Speaker Roblan mentions, the task forces that are in place to work through these issues have members and stakeholders that are excited about it because they have seen in what was viewed originally as fairly difficult or these tied circumstances that actually you can get the work done. So I believe you have people with very high expectations. That's probably good for the three of us to be in that position. And I think our members and the stakeholders around these major issues are going to go home, rest up, see their families, and come back raring to go. I think we're in a good spot.
Do you feel at all in February that you've taken some tough decisions and kind of put them off to February, that some of the budget projections may not pan out? I mean, that February is going to be difficult in that sense?
Take a shot. Look, if you don't think there was a lot of tough decisions made, you should have sat in the meetings with these guys. The Senate President, he may joke and say, I can be direct. He can be very direct. He can be direct to a fault. But I appreciate the directness, and I think it helps us every day when we met grinding through what were really difficult issues, given the state of where we were from a revenue perspective when we started and rebalancing the prior biennial budget, given the place we were dealing with the reductions to be made to budgets moving forward, and the fact that we sat through with our co-chairs and set aside actually a historic ending fund balance because none of us has the highest level degree of expectation for the economy. So we don't go forward without trepidation because there are some uncertainties in front of us, but plenty of hard decisions have been made, including holding some of that money aside to say, what will the future bring? Those are hard decisions in themselves when you have a demand for services that we're currently under. But again, I think we've been prudent in our planning. Everything from our current budget to our capital construction and bonding. We didn't say yes to everything. We said we're going to pay close attention to how these things work. So I think we've set ourselves up. Regardless of what happens, we'll come back with some room for error in both directions.
Yeah, and to that I would also say we had exceptional committees on Ways and Means, and they did an amazingly difficult work. And the reality is each and every one of those members know exactly what's next going to have to happen for the February session. And I believe they will be watching day to day, week to week, what's going on, and be prepared when they come back to make those hard decisions, knowing that they only have the 35 days.
Everyone has declared this session, practically everyone, a success. And I'm not going to dispute that. But are there things that you wish that you as leadership think you could have gotten accomplished but you weren't able to? Not that because you have a different point of view, Republican versus Democrat, whatever, but you weren't able to get people to go along even though you thought it could have been done.
I'll take a shot again. Look, these things that many will call accomplishments, whether that's Senate Bill 301 and federal tax connection to education reform, probably not a one of us don't wish that you could put everybody in the right place and everybody to be in agreement. That simply doesn't happen. With 90 members of the legislature, there are too many varying ideas. So while you might wish to get further along on any single thing, I think the good news about this is we discussed this at length. In fact, discussed as many options as possible around these difficult decisions to say, what if the outcome is this? What if the outcome? How will we feel? How will our members feel about these things? So, the what ifs never quit, and the wish list might be long about bringing everyone to the place where there's a level of comfort, including Oregonians, and probably most importantly, Oregonians. But in the communication you get from them, obviously, on all issues, you probably find it hard to please every single Oregonian. But I believe when we review this session, and as Oregonians outside of the legislature, again, it will be ranked quite high in terms of the level of success and the level of cooperation and bipartisan movement of good legislation.
Yeah, I actually believe that every one of the 90 members has their own list, and it's different from anybody else's list. So everybody, and that's happened every session, so that's not unique to this session. The remarkable part is all the things that we did find a pathway to get through, and I think some of those are going to be pieces of legislation over the next 20 years that make major differences for kids, families, small businesses, all of them, and their ability to be successful. But we pushed it to the limit what we were going to get through this session, I believe. And I think that what we got is what we got. And you work at it. Every session we come here, people have a reason to come back. And that's the same with this session.
Well, I made a list, and Speaker Hanna and Speaker Roblan saw the three big things that the Republicans left and the three big things the Democrats left. I'm not going to tell you what they are. And we were smiling about how the system must really be working. I guess what I feel sad about, this is going to sound so inconsistent. I'm glad we're going home, but I'm sad we're going home, because I honestly believe it really got tough these last 2 weeks. And when you look at the magnitude of the education package and the magnitude of the budget package with the Education Service District and the magnitude and what we did and how we did it, I really believe that if the two of us with the other key players had some time, there's nothing we can't do. And I can't believe I'm saying that. And I know what Bruce wants, and he knows what I want. But I've already thinking about that, and my staff said, my chief said, Peter, will you leave it alone? Could you just take 24 hours out? I'm already thinking of some big issue that I think we need, and I'd love to get back in there and see if we can't, through the give and take, do what we did. And so I guess my sadness today is that I can't tomorrow start in again with the two gentlemen here and say, all right, here, and I'm potentially being very vague, and you're not going to get it out of me, but I'm already thinking of a major give and take in a big area, in two very big areas. So I guess what I'm sad about, to answer your question, is that this magic is now ending. And that's what worries me. And by the way, Mr. Hughes, no. Nobody, you're not going to editorial. We're going to get killed in the press, and you know it. The Oregonians already hammered us in editorial. Your newspaper is going to hammer us. The Guard was halfway nice to us. So I expect the press to kill us. So I don't think they'd be nice to us. I don't think you think it was successful. Because if you said that, you're going to be unhappy. So I think that was a misstatement, Mr. Hughes. You have not said it was successful. You have not said we did a good job, and you're never going to do that. So don't sit there looking at me as though I figured that out. I go back 400 years with you, and you're just trying to set me up.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the governor and his leadership style and how significant he was in, or not in, the way that you've discussed that you were able to work together and get things done.
Absolutely. I'd be glad to start. I've told this story before, but 2 days after the election, the governor called me and caught me by surprise to a degree. I mean, I knew the governor. It came up as John Kitzhaber on the phone, so I mean, I knew him enough to have the phone number. But he just called me and said, "Congratulations." Few other things, which I won't repeat, but it was sort of the team effort. And I'm looking forward to working with you. And when I got off the phone, I thought, wow, that was really an amazing gesture. And what he said was, I was looking forward to working with you. And from that day forward, it continued. And when he said, I'm going to be engaged in the process, I intend to meet with the presiding officers, I will come to your caucus, I began to say, well, I'm a fan, and if he follows through on those things, I'll just stand up and say, I'm not just beginning, I'll be a fan. He came to our caucus on multiple occasions. I don't know how many personal meetings we sat through with the governor and our chiefs of staff working through very difficult issues. And one of the things as I passed on a personal compliment the other day to the governor, I said, you know, it's interesting. And whether it's simply you or the governor's office, when you sit at the table with a group of leaders and you are the governor, you put everyone in a position of them being very, very accountable to what they say and do after we make decisions. And I've appreciated you coming and doing that. And so I am grateful. He spent a great deal of time with us. He shared insight from the executive branch that, as a legislator, I've never seen, and showed a level of concern from a personal standpoint to see that the three of us, I think, not only built the relationship to continue working well, but had a genuine interest in seeing Oregon get good legislation.
Yeah, he would always answer the phone if you had a question, and he was very good at pushing you past where you wanted to go. And I think the only way we got through a lot of the stuff and the bills that we passed this session was because he decided that he was going to be right there, supporting, pushing, asking, agreeing. He was in the room. He was present the whole session, and I really appreciated that. We did have a lot of meetings together, and I think it started out slowly. He came to our caucus whenever we asked. He was offered to be there even when we didn't ask. So, I mean, he wanted to make sure he was part of any of the solutions and any of the conversations that needed to happen. He was going to be there. Bringing us all together in large groups a couple different times during the session, I think, was important for all of us to see that we were working together and that he was going to be there. When he had a vision for something, he was willing to get up to the board and strike and not have staff do that. All of those things led to, I think, a working relationship between the four of us that was unlike anything I had expected.
Well, I served with John Kitzhaber when he was a state senator, and I was in the House when he was Senate president, and I was the caucus leader in the House. And when he was governor for 8 years, I was one of the lead negotiators in those terrible 2002 5 special sessions. So we have a history, and I find myself thinking about this. I think, and we've not had a heavy philosophical discussion, and nor are we particularly close, but I think it's important to John. He's older, and I think he said, I want to run again, and people chose him. He said the government was broke, but he also now is much a part of it as anybody. I think the veto thing really bothered him, and he really has worked extraordinarily hard to work on issues and measures and with people in a way that it never comes to that ultimate no. And I think that is the biggest change I see in him. He's always been willing to go before caucus. He loves that. He loves to go before caucuses, regardless. He likes the give and take. He truly does. There's an academic part of him, an intellectual part of him. He loves to be challenged as I do. He likes to go back and forth. But I think the thing I've noticed about him is this: he really is important for him to find that middle road in a way that we don't come down to any kind of veto or absolutely having to say no. And I think that was extremely important in a session where it's 30-30 and it's 16-14, as well as politics has changed. And I think he's figured out the public has changed, the mood has changed, and all those currents are out there. So I think he did well. I think he did very well. And I also think he knew just how to, the meetings he'd call, I watched him, and he would only talk so much. He would not try to dominate, although he would occasionally start to move in certain directions. So all of that are things that he chose to do to be a part of what we are. At no time was he saying it's the legislature's fault, or was he willing to do that. I think he saw if it's the legislature struggling, I'm struggling, and vice versa, because I think we all came to the conclusion we all needed each other, for better or worse, and we better figure that out.
Well, certainly just about all legislators I talked to talked about the remarkable degree of cooperation. I don't think I found a single member of the House who said, well, I want to repeat 30-30 next time. They all want to be back in the majority. If you end up in a situation in future sessions, the likelihood one is well be in the majority, but do you think there will be things about the way this session ran that will become more institutionalized in the legislature, even if you go back to a more traditional situation of one party having the majority?
I believe that the relationships that were forged with co-chairs and with other people trying to get bills, if you go back and look at the number of bills that had co-sponsors from different parties, if you look at how many amendments were on a lot of those bills that came because they really had conversations with each other, I don't think, as long as people who were here during this session remain in this building, they will have a different connection with their counterparts on the other side that would not have happened without the 30-30. I hope that leads to better communication, an understanding when things are going bad to go talk to each other and try to work through it, which we had to do this time. There was no option anymore. We had to work it out because that was the way it was. When you have a majority, it isn't quite the same. And I hope that when people remember how it felt in this relationship, that will help them guide them to a better solutions in the future. And I think the relationships are going to be stronger because of it.
Speaker Hanna.
I want to go ahead, Speaker Hanna. Then I want to make a statement because I learned from these two. I want to tell you something that it's very profound.
Well, I just think it took us a while to figure this out. But if you think through the numbers, nearly a third of the House Republicans have never been in any session except a tied session. They don't have another experience. A full third of House Republicans have never been in the majority, and a full third of House Democrats have never been in the minority. So you will have a very different session for a whole lot of legislators when things change away from a perfect balance. But I completely agree with Speaker Roblan that if you serve today in this legislature, there's no way you will not be impacted by the relationships built, by the need for, an absolute need for, give and take among members. And I think every person who has served today in this legislative session will be a better member as long as they serve in the Oregon legislature.
This is for my age. I'm very old. Thank you, Peter. I have been in the minority and the majority in the House, and I've been in the minority and the majority in the Senate, and I've been in a tied Senate. And I have been in the longest sessions of Oregon history, and I've been in 16 of Oregon's 35 special sessions. So I'm a bit of a geezer. I'm really nervous about some things I did, but I think it'd be interesting to see if they hold. And one of them you're going to love. We were 16-14 in the Senate. So I decided to make some committees tied, equal, and I also decided to repart some Republican chairs. Query, Professor. So like a political science class I'm in, you probably are struggling with that. Dick Hughes. Does that set a precedent in the future for a presiding officer? Now, I'm not going to say anything more than that because some of you probably don't understand what I just said. I'm not going to explain it to you. The next thing because that's going to get me in enough trouble, because I'm actually about going crazy. But there's something else that's happened that I disliked intensely when it happened. But like so many things in life, I was wrong. The House likes to go home on weekends. They want to go home. Now, I grew up believing you don't go home. You're a plow horse. You get back out in the field and you pull your plow. And one day it ends there and they turn you into glue. So, but they want to go home. Well, guess what? The Senate then decides it wants to go home one day earlier than when they go home. So they want to take Fridays off. And I'm thinking, this is good. We'll work one day a week. But, so I'm fighting this emotionally. Well, you know what I think? I'm going to tell you something. I thought we would take Fridays off to maybe through March, maybe at most. We were taking Fridays off all the way into June. We were keeping up with our agenda. And guess what? Human beings were human beings. Ordinarily at this time, people would be destroyed around here. They'd be totally worn down. But by able to go home, particularly those that come far away, reconnect with family, their jobs, and their constituents. These two gentlemen live a long way away. I think it dramatically affects work productivity, because I've often said you've got to be in shape to be in the Oregon legislature. I really do. And I think that's a change that's going to be permanent. And we started to work our work schedules around that, not because we don't want to work, because it's very important that reconnection. So I think that's a major change that probably is going to hold, regardless of who's control. The other issue will get interesting because of what I decided to do this session, ironically to relate it to you, but also because I've always wondered if you shouldn't do something like that. Do you understand what I said?
I think I'm clear on that. I just want to point out something just subtle.
Okay.
Just subtle.
This is good.
And this is that just because we were home did not mean we weren't connected and he wasn't calling us. All right?
Now, look,
he does
This
like
guy,
his phone.
he will not stop. And so,
He does like his phone.
Look,
just
And
because you're
give
home
him-
for the weekend doesn't mean you're
We,
not working.
we
All
understand that taking the weekend off for us was a time to reconnect. For him, it was a time to worry and call us.
I was all right.
You think it might be time for the e-board?
It is.
It is.
We gotta go to e-board.
Yep,
Yeah.
we have to go to
I don't
e-board.
want to go to e-board. I want to stay here. I'm having more fun doing this than e-board. I don't want to go to e-board. Go ahead.
All right.
Any other questions, folks?
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.